Welcome one and all to another edition of the Defo Show with Lubie here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, brought to you by Water Cleanup of Florida. The weather is constantly fun here in South Florida. It's been cool lately, but that doesn't mean our homes or offices are safe. Well, they are, because you have Water Cleanup of Florida on your side. Whether it be water or fire damage, no worries. Just give them a call, 954-579-0356. Water Cleanup of Florida will make your life easy. They made mine and my wife so much easier when they worked on our townhouse. Over 60 years of combined experience between Michael, Robert, George, their entire team. 954-579-0356. Check them out on their website, wcufl.com, or at Water Cleanup FL. Don't let the heat, don't let the cold, don't let whatever our weather does to your home or office, be it water or fire damage, stress you out. Water Cleanup of Florida, 954-579-0356. If you have the schmutz, believe me, they have the guts. So the Heat and the Lakers get it on tonight. We talked with Mr. 5 Reasons, Mr. Heat, Ethan Skolnick, about, it made us reminisce about the days of LeBron leaving the Heat, where the Heat and LeBron actually stand today. Because remember, it was very coarse when LeBron left between the Heat and LeBron and the Heat, where they stand today, and what could have been if LeBron James stayed with the Miami Heat. We talk with the guy who covered LeBron down here, the guy who followed LeBron to Cleveland, and the guy that knows the Heat better than anyone we know, Ethan Skolnick, right now on the Defo Show with Lubie here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
I mean, I think for the Heat side, I think Pat's over some of the bitterness of it. And Bron, it's like, it's funny. He praises the Heat just by the way he talks. Like, he uses almost false phrases and Riley's phrases. You know, it's constant. It's, the main thing being the main thing. He says it all the time now. That's a Pat phrase that Spo repeats all the time. So I think it's been mended in terms of the respect. I mean, I think there's respect both ways. I think from the Heat side, it was just, what would LeBron have done if he had stayed? I guess that's the question. I mean, the one championship in Cleveland, I think even Heat fans have to acknowledge, means more than the two in Miami, because he won for his hometown and all the rest of it, even though he used to hate Cleveland. Akron doesn't like Cleveland, but whatever. But I think that the one title means more there, but I also think there's no question LeBron would have won more championships if he'd stayed in Miami, because they were gonna fix that thing. I mean, they were trying to get Lowry, Sol, others way back, and they would have figured out a way to get him back to the finals more times than he did, even when he went, to Cleveland and beyond. So I feel like he would have more rings at this point if he stayed with the Heat, but we will never know.
Ethan Skolnick with us here. Check out his 5 Reasons Sports Network. 5 on the Floor is what? Number 5 podcast of all NBA podcasts? And that includes like Adam Silver's and Shaq. And
yeah, Draymond Green.
All these guys you figure would dominate in this category.
Out, though. Yeah, but here's the thing, people. We keep getting bumped out because every player started a podcast.
Yes.
Like, literally, my guy UD started a podcast with Mike Miller. Like, that should be in my network. Like, all of a sudden that popped up. I was like, wait, what was that? I've talked to you about it since I started a podcast for us. So it's like every day we get bumped down a spot in the charts because every player wants to speak. Like, it's just, all you got to do is go on the podcast and criticize Bill Russell, and all of a sudden he's top of the podcast.
There it is, man. You know what? He couldn't shoot. That 15.6 career scoring average. It was an indicator that he was kind of a bricklayer. Even that short hook, that left-handed hook in the paint. Every time you bring up the whole Riley split with LeBron James, I always picture. I mean, it's right out of The Godfather. You don't come to Las Vegas and speak to a man like Mo Green like that, Michael.
Right.
He kind of left him sitting at like the circus, sucking down a 99-cent shrimp cocktail, sitting next to some lady that had like ash all the way to the floor from the pack of cigarettes she'd been smoking, and smeared lipstick, and then you call at the last minute and say, "Not coming, Pat, not coming." That was ugly.
Soccer.
I mean,
yeah, he was watching soccer.
My God.
Wasn't it the World Cup? I think it was the World Cup. I think that was.
Could have been, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they were. Andy and Pat were at the blackjack table. I mean, everybody knew. Well, except the Heat, it felt like everybody knew he was leaving. Like speaking of Mike Miller, he's the one that actually told me. He's like, "I'll see you in Cleveland." I said, "What?" He's like, "He's leaving." I said, "What?" I said, "The Heat think he's staying." And I said, "Well, the Heat are wrong. He's going to Cleveland." He says, he goes, "I'm joining you." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, and then it was like 4 or 5 days later that the Lee Jenkins story dropped on Sports Illustrated. It was like, And the Heat were like the last to know. So yeah, that little meeting in Las Vegas, that was a waste of a trip. So, but I played blackjack with Andy Ellisberg, and he's quite good, as you can imagine. He's pretty good with numbers, so
Yeah.
I'm sure it was a profitable venture anyway.
All right. We keep asking this question, and you would be much more on top of this than most anybody, for that matter, because you do have this inside scoop on the Miami Heat organization, a.k.a., the reason that you're known as Scoop Skolnick. But I don't know who or what. I mean, it's weird. You hear all kinds of speculation about who was involved, possibly as trade bait in a deal in this Damian Lillard deal in the offseason, supposedly. But how crazy is Joe Cronin? If and you can probably do better at verifying this. If Jaime Jaquez Jr., if Tyler Hero, and maybe even Duncan Robinson were involved in a package for this guy, how dumb do you feel if you didn't take these guys right now?
Well, yeah. Well, if it was all
is that true? I mean, is that possible that all those guys were involved?
No. Well, here's the thing. Okay. It's okay to call Joe Cronin unprofessional and self-sabotaging in this process, because he was.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit of a reach to say that all of that was available. Here's basically what was.
We wouldn't throw them all in there.
Well,
Bam too. I'm going to give them Bam out of line.
Well, yeah, that they did have. But they had my understanding was, and a lot of this came out after the fact, that during the process people don't talk. But then you go back and you start to ask questions, and everybody's willing to talk at that point. Essentially, they had 5 internal conference calls with all the big players in the Heat organization, who you know who they are. I mean, it's the front office that's been there to get forever, and ownership, etc. And they had and they discussed what they would be willing to give up. But the problem was that Cronin wouldn't talk to them. So, and I'll get to that in a second, but so they never really got to make the Godfather offer, so to speak, because there was no communication. So essentially they had their own communication, and they were willing to give up Tyler as sort of the core piece, and also 2 first-round picks, or Pat was willing to make Jovic a substitute from one of the first-round picks, and then Duncan was essentially to make the money match. So yes, Duncan would have been involved in this. Jaquez, my understanding, and this is before he blew up the last couple of weeks.
Remember.
After the fact. Jaquez was not ever offered officially, and they weren't really going to do that. But again, I'll come back to this, okay? If Cronin had actually spoken to them, he might have been.
Yeah.
It never got that far, because the man simply refused to conduct NBA business the way it's always conducted, because he was spiteful. And Woj can have his little pretty stories about moleskin notebooks and all the rest of this stuff, but the reality is the guy didn't do what's best for his own franchise because he wanted to spite Dame and Aaron Goodwin in the Heat, and that's really what it comes down to. If they had actually engaged, I think that the Heat probably would have gone a little further. But the Heat, they had concerns about Dame. I know this is crazy to think, but they were concerned about the age, they were concerned about the contract, and they were concerned about his defense.
Wow.
So they were not willing to go. They wanted him, but they were not willing to go all in. I've reported this since. They actually were willing to give up more for Drew Holiday than they were for Dame Lillard.
Oh, wow.
And that was after Drew was traded to Portland. So if Cronin had engaged them on that, they were willing to throw in Caleb Martin into the deal, which they were not for Dame. So they actually were willing to go to Hero, possibly 2 first-round picks, Duncan and Caleb, for Drew. Well, I'm sorry, I should take 2 first-round picks. It would have been Jovic or the second first-round pick. But basically, the reason for that was that, first thing, they just viewed Drew as a perfect fit with them, which he is, okay? But also, they value defense, and their concern was that Dame might, at a certain age, fall off the table there even more. Now, people can have reasonable arguments about whether he'd right about that, but he'd have very specific views of players that other organizations don't have. And they also have a value on players that other organizations don't have. So sometimes what is best for them is not what the common perception would be. But I can tell you, I was told flat out, I will tell you, by a top 5 member of the organization, we wanted Drew more than Dame.
Oh, really?
So
They said it that flatly. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That would have blown Lubie away.
That would have. Well, I thought Drew Holiday fit well, but I didn't think he's Dame.
Right. Well, and I agree with you, but I think part of this is, and I know we can look back and say, well, okay, now it seems obvious, but I think they have a little bit of the Kyle Lowry situation. Although they've made the best of it this year, I think aging point guards concern them now more, and because Kyle obviously hasn't lived up to what they gave him, and Dame was roughly the same age, and Kyle was a declining player on defense. We can make a case that, okay, it's crazy. Why would you want Drew more than Dame? But from the Heat's perspective, I get it, because Drew would have just plugged right into their defensive system. You would have had Jimmy, Bam, and Dame anchoring their Jimmy Drew and Bam anchoring their defense, and nobody would have ever scored against them. So I kind of see it, but it wasn't as simple as, okay, Jaquez, here, take Jaquez. But I just think if Cronin had actually spoken to them, and then the public pressure had mounted on the Heat to make a move, and it came down to Jaime or no Jaime, they might have done it. But I could also tell you that Caron Butler, who coached Jaime in Summer League, told the top levels of the Heat organization, do not trade this guy. He's going to be an absolute superstar. Oh, wow. And Caron was one of their best rookies that they've ever had, and they value his opinion. So they kind of saw this coming with Jaime, even if the rest of the world did not.
Yeah, I mean, he was a solid player at UCLA. I don't know if, the ghost of John Wooden held him back any, but it seemed to me, and you watch this guy for several years there, because he did go all the way through his senior season. And he looked like a solid player, very fundamentally sound, and he has exceeded anything that you might have imagined, though, with his play, especially last month or so. I mean, that would be a legitimate Rookie of the Year candidate. All right, I know you have only a couple of minutes left to be with us. Ethan Skolnick guesting with us, so you can catch him on 5 on the Floor, his NBA podcast, which is now, it's dropped from 5th to 89th.
Every single
the
player
entire league.
Everybody has a podcast.
Yeah. Scrubs that you never heard of.
The ship be sinking, Jeff. The ship be sinking. It's going the other direction. But yes, we'll try to get back at the top.
No, I mean, it's great. I mean, and obviously getting respect and recognition because, if Draymond Green is going to come clean about whether or not he's just a flat-out dirty player and with no psychological issues, you're probably going to watch that. It's kind of like this whole Pat McAfee thing with Aaron Rodgers. All right, so what are you seeing this year? I mean, so far, just a general synopsis. Overall NBA, Celtics, Lubie is waiting for Porzingis to be on the injured list. He's not buying into them. You have a lot of other teams that have shown definite flashes and teams that you figure you can count on no matter how they're playing right now, including Denver, which still looks very good, even though Murray was injured for a while. But what do you see? Who's the cream of the crop right now?
Well, I think there's really a tale of two conferences so far. I think the East is holding the form. Like, I think if you looked before the season, you would have said, okay, Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Miami. Sounds about right. I think you look at the Heat's injuries and scheduled early. I think they're pretty well positioned at 18 and 12. They feel pretty good about themselves. Boston's been probably the best team. Milwaukee has taken some time to kind of figure it out, but it seems like they're starting to. Their defense is bad, though. Like, they're going to have to do something to fix that, because that was sort of their staple. They're a very good offensive team, but they're not good defensively now. Brook Lopez has lost a step, and so has Middleton, and they don't have Drew. So that's a problem. And Philadelphia, I think, has been better. I think they're just better coached than they were last year. I think that's helped. But the West is, to me, more interesting, because the West, you're seeing some of these young teams that we thought had a lot of upside do it much faster. OKC is for real. Like, they're going to be a problem, like they were a problem in the Harden Westbrook era. Like, you look at where they already are and how many picks they still have. Like, if Presti wants to cash in those picks for a star to pair with Chet, with Jalen, and obviously with SGA, I mean, you're talking about elite immediately. And I think Minnesota has been there's talent there, but I don't think people thought the fit was that great. So they've been a good surprise. Denver's going to be there towards the end. I think the biggest disappointment. I'm not disappointed in the Lakers. Honestly, I don't like it. The in-season tournament is kind of a joke. So, but the Clippers are kind of getting it together. But Phoenix has been the biggest disappointment, and I guess it's the problem when you build a top-heavy team based on guys who don't stay healthy. Like that's and it feels like Brooklyn all over again. They just moved it to Phoenix, and now Durant. It's the same stuff. And I don't know who is expecting Beal to be on the court all the time because he never is. Could they make a run? They could, but I think this may be a time where we're probably in the West going to see in the conference finals like a Denver, because I just think they'll get. They're very well. That's a well-oiled machine with Jokic, and I think they'll be there at the end. And then it's going to be one of the young teams, and it could be OKC, it could be Minnesota, but I think the West is fascinating, and I think the East is the final four teams in the East are going to be Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and Miami. So once it gets there, I just think it comes down to matchups. I know that the Celtics, as good as they are, do not want to see Jimmy Butler again, provided that Jimmy is cares by that point, and I could just absolutely see Jaime Jaquez busting them for 33 on their home floor in a Game 7. It just feels perfect.
It's a perfect world, yeah.
and Bill Simmons shouting at the sky. Once Jaquez starts doing it, it's like, okay, so Jaquez is a new Caleb Martin, and then next year they'll have another guy who does stuff up there. I think they're kind of in the Celtics' head, so I don't know. How does a Miami OKC final feel?
That'd be funny. That'd be fun.
We're going to have a repeat
Resurrection.
2012.
I could be as dead wrong about that one as I was about the first one when I thought James Harden was going to be the key player in the series. I know you have to run, Ethan. We appreciate your time, my friend.
The key player in that series, Defo. If you remember James Harden's performance, so yeah,
it was poor. Yes, I couldn't have been any more wrong. No, it was a tragic prediction on my part. I was trying to be a wise guy, sound more clever than the other guys who went with the natural. Yeah, it's all going to be about Westbrook and Durant. And I'm like, no, watch out for this guy James Harden. And he was the key to the series because he was so bad that I think he cost him the series. Thanks, Ethan.
You're the best.
Always a pleasure.
Happy New Year, my friend.
Ethan Skolnick, man. Now, that guy's well informed, you would have to say.
Yes. I actually
when it comes to, especially, that stuff on the Miami Heat. Wow. What a way to stiff, though, Pat Riley. Did it have to resort to that level of ugliness, Lubie?
I don't know why it did. LeBron's done some interesting. Look, the decision was handled weirdly. It was a great idea.
It was handled by Jim Gray, for God's sake.
It was a great idea.
How bad of an idea was that?
Taking something that everyone wanted to see and making money for a charity. So it was a great idea, but the fact that it was an hour made no sense. The fact that it was Jim Gray of all people. The fact that...
That was only an hour?
Yeah, it was an hour.
Like 20.
The fact that he used the phrase, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach, just...
Oh, that was weak, too.
The whole thing...
That was Al Michaels-esque, wasn't it? Do you believe in miracles? You
done
had to
well.
write that down in advance and then deliver that, well, I'm taking my talents to South Beach. Come on.
And that he don't even play...
Are we bitter, though? You didn't have to sit through this. Did you have to? Were you producing that show?
Yes,
that ridiculous show that we did from the Miami Arena?
Yeah, of course.
We were on the air for like 7 hours. I had just gotten a job at the station, too, 940 WINZ.
Yes.
And you and I barely knew each other, right? And they sent me down there to cover that whole thing.
Yeah. Those of you that remember, LeBron coming was a big deal. We had just started working together, Defo and I. And they want not one, not two, not three, not four. We actually aired live on the radio. And it was just as weird on the radio as it was to see in person. And it was one of the rare missteps for LeBron. The decision, another one that was a great idea in theory, but sort of weirdly handled. My talents to South Beach was a weird phrase that everyone copied for years, but it made LeBron look sort of pig-headed and arrogant, which, look, to be as good as he is, if those may be his greatest faults, that's not so bad. He's committed, from what we know, no criminal acts. He's a family man. He's a great businessman, and he wins. So, yeah, those were interesting days, and I appreciate recapping it with Ethan. And interesting to see that the Heat and LeBron have bygones be bygone. And literally, LeBron use Spoelstra and Rileyisms all the time. Heat, Lakers tonight, we'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about the Dolphins trying to figure out a way to get back on track after a rough game against the Ravens with more injuries. The Miami Hurricanes off-season looking for a quarterback. The FSU Knowles getting over the whole missing of the college football playoff. We have the college football tie-up game coming up. We'll talk about it all. The Defo Show with Lubie. Check us out each and every morning, 8 to 9 on South Florida Live. Check us out on our national podcast, the Believe Network, BLEAV, LeBronJames.com. Search After Hours. Check us out on our daily podcast on No Filter. Just go to Google, search Caffeine TV, The Morning Briefing, and check us out here with our local South Florida skewed content, The Defo Show with Lubie, here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
From the newly renovated sports bar to the beautiful bayside views captured at the Tiki Bar, Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill has it all. Located at mile marker 104, the Big Chill also offers waterfront dining while experiencing breathtaking sunset views of the Florida Keys. It's simply the hottest spot in the Keys to cool off. That's Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill at mile marker 104 in Key Largo. For more information, call today at 305-453-9066.
These days, we're all looking for comfort anywhere we can find it. Thank goodness for Landlubbers Raw Bar and Grill in Plantation, because they are making sure you are as comfortable as possible. First of all, they're not only open for delivery and pickup. All you have to do is go to landlubbersbarandgrill.com for both pickup and free delivery. You're going to have the best wings in the world. You're going to have a great burger. You're going to have their amazing soups. Again, Landlubbers, Raw Bar, and Grill. It's nice and easy. Just go to landlubbersbarandgrill.com for both your pickup and free delivery. Thank goodness for Landlubbers for making you always feel right at hhome.
Hey, folks, Tony Segreto here. Let me ask you a question. What do you look for when you go out to eat? Good food, obviously, friendly atmosphere, not too loud, but good energy, reasonable prices, and a place where you feel comfortable. All those ingredients, no pun meant there, are hard to find unless you're talking about the Texas Roadhouse. You see, they encompass all of those attributes. Really, really good food, amazing atmosphere, good for a family, good for a date, or just a night out for yourself, and prices that will make you extremely happy. Their ribs, unmatched. Steaks, hand-cut every day. Everything, and I mean everything, is made on site, including their incredible bread. It's the one day, folks, that you can forget about low-carb diets. Trust me when I tell you, Texas Roadhouse, your restaurant, your destination when you say, where should we go and eat tonight?